Christ is king and every single knee will bow, yours included, whether you follow Jesus now or not. But we are in, of course, evidence demands a verdict. And there are a litany of historical sources outside of the New Testament which confirm our faith. And one of them, important factor, was Josephus. So Flavius Josephus was a Jewish politician, soldier, historian who lived AD 37 to 100. Provides some very important accounts. He's quoted as being the single most important Jewish historian of the ancient world, and Antiquities of the Jews, written by Josephus to explain Jewish people and their beliefs to Romans in fighting Jewish bigotry. In this Antiquities volumes, he wrote about the death of Jesus's brother, James. And everyone should read the book of James, absolutely. But just quoting from one section of this, and again, this is written by a non-Christian, this is something not in the New Testament, and by a historian. He wrote, Festus was now dead, and Albinus was but upon the road, so he assembled the Sanhedrin of judges and brought before them the brother of Jesus, who was called Christ, whose name was James. He delivered them to be stoned. Of course, James, brother of Christ, stoned for believing and then preaching that Jesus was indeed the Son of God, risen from the dead. You know, this is the only case in history, number of times throughout history, people have claimed to be maybe one with God, God in flesh, a chosen, right? How often do their family members affirm the same? And do we have a single other instance where one of their family members died for believing the claims of that individual? I think not. We'll continue on. This is one of the more significant non-Christian passages relating to historical Jesus. The substance of the James passage quoted is clear. Josephus verifies that a man named James was put to death. He was Jesus' brother, and that this Jesus was called Christ. Moving on, we got Tacitus. Cornelius Tacitus was a Roman historian, lived between AD 56 to 120. Robert Van Tors says he is considered one of the greatest Roman historians, as his Annals one of the finest works, generally acknowledged by modern historians as our best source of information on the period. So a writer who is known as the best source of information also mentioned Jesus, or Christians at the very least. So in AD 64, there was a devastating fire for which many people believe Nero was responsible. Of course, Nero was the ruling guy there in Rome, right, at this time period in the 50s, 60s, right? So whenever he was kind of doing his thing. Nero persecuted Christians in AD 50, AD 60, AD 65, right? Nero was persecuting Christians. Tells us there was a early church, very early church. So there are atheists who will put out myths that Jesus never lived, or they will put out myths that Christianity started significantly later. Of course, all those myths are completely historically unfounded. But this is from historian Tacitus. Nero created scapegoats and subjected to the most refined tortures those who the common people called Christians. Hated for their abominable crimes, their name comes from Christ, who during the reign of Tiberius had been executed by Procurator Pontius Pilate. Again, confirming narratives through the New Testament. Time and time and time again, we have facts listed in the New Testament confirmed through other historical sources. Pretty well proves that Christ indeed was executed on a cross, right? And then we have time and time again where there's a persecution laid out of the early Christian church. People contemporary lived among Jesus, and they were murdered for their testimony that Jesus indeed did die, was resurrected, lived with them for 40 days. Hence, we do have a lot of substantive and historical sources confirming Jesus. There are lesser sources or sources of less significant, Mara bar Serapion around AD 70, a Syrian and perhaps also a Stoic philosopher, wrote a letter from prison encouraging his son to pursue wisdom, writing, "What good did it do the Athenians to kill Socrates, for which deed they were punished with famine and pestilence? What did it avail the Samians to burn Pythagoras, since their country was entirely burned? What did it do, or what did it avail the Jews to kill their wise king, since their kingdom was taken away from them from that time on?" Not a Christian, writing in AD 70, confirming testimony within the New Testament. Thales, AD 55, historian, he wrote a 3-volume account of Eastern Mediterranean from the fall of Troy to approximately AD 50. Much of the work has been lost. A quote remains in History of the World, written by Julius Africanus. Each of the synoptic gospels includes an account of a darkness that was visible during Jesus' crucifixion. In his historical account he wrote in the 3rd book of his history, Thales, he called this darkness an eclipse of the sun, wrongly in the opinion of that author. There was Lucian of Samosata, a Greek satirist. In The Death of Peregrinus, tells the story of a man who converted away from Christianity before taking his life. Without mentioning Jesus, he writes, "The one whom they still worship today, the man in Palestine who was crucified, because he brought this new form of initiation into the world." Lucian says Christians consider themselves brothers the moment they stop worshiping the Greek gods and begin worshiping the crucified sophist. That's a non-Christian account confirming the crucifixion. We see this time and time again. The idea that people would deny the life of Jesus or his crucifixion. It's baffling as you dig into the sources. Baffling. Suetonius also wrote, AD 64, punishment was inflicted on the Christians, a class of men given to a new and mischievous superstition. So the question we have to ask about James, and the question we have to ask about other people living at the time of Jesus, who came to believe that he not only died, but then was resurrected and lived among them for 40 days. People who lived alongside Jesus were dying due to their account. Why did those people put themselves through so much trouble? Because indeed our Lord Jesus did die, was resurrected, lived among them for 40 days. He is alive today. Pray to him. Pray every day, praise every day.